What is going on, everybody? As you know it, for starters, the land acknowledgement. I'm recording this here on occupied territory, otherwise known as Albuquerque, New Mexico. And as always, your host, back in black action, Zachariah Jazz, and this is It's Controversial. So, back by unpopular demand after somewhat of a long hiatus. Been trying to get this new equipment set up, a laptop, and trying to get it updated to Windows 10. Look, I'm not a tech savvy kind of person. I not very well versed in computers and stuff like that. So it kind of took me a while to get this laptop up to speed, to work with the new webcam that I got, microphone that I got that you can't see, and so it's taking me a while to get this hardware up and running, the software up to date. She hasn't touched the laptop since like 2014, so it kind of took a little while. Anyway, in this downtime, in this time that I've been away, there's a lot has been going on. The election, right, on the 2nd. So I'm gonna start with that. I have a few more topics that I want to talk to you about. Some more extensive than this one, others not so much. But the election. So Keller won, the incumbent. He won by popular demand, to say the least, right? Manny took 26%, I believe it was. Eddie Aragon took 18%, which was more than expected, especially by certain polls, local polls. I think one was by the Albuquerque Journal. He did a lot better than expected, and that is in and of itself is cause for concern, honestly, because we all know his politics and the way he wanted to run the city, right? Very hard on crime, very pro police. I'm even damn near convinced that he's working with the police union, that Sean Willoughby and the APOA have brand their Crime Matters More campaign as a indirect, kind of passive PR campaign for Eddie Aragon's mayoral candidacy. So let's talk about that, right? Because Mayor Keller, the incumbent, elected for a second term, he is not anti-police. He is not for the defund movement. While he's advocated for Black Lives Matter, he likes to say Black Lives Matter and stuff, yada yada yada. That's all dress up for me, but we all know that he is not about defunding the police. Granted, he put together this new emergency services that have been responding to a lot of calls so far in the last couple months. Now, whether that continues now that he has won a second term is up for thought, I guess, for debate. So now it is important to keep up the pressure on Tim Keller and the administration, to keep up the pressure and keep pushing the narrative and keep pushing the agenda, you know what I'm saying? Because we are still waiting on the next IMR report, IMR 14, right? And we don't know yet what those numbers are going to look like, but I guarantee you, based off of the recent survey put out by the APOA, that is the Albuquerque Police Officers Association, that 421 officers took part in. Based on that, IMR 14, I don't have confidence that it's going to look very good. It's probably going to show a lot of a lack of operational compliance to the CASA, that is the court-appointed settlement agreement, and the consent decree, in simpler terms. So I'm not very confident about that. So, and we know that with Eddie Aragon gaining 18% of the vote, that shows a rise in what I would call opposition ideologies. I won't get too dramatic with the terms, but yeah, it's definitely not good. So we need to be more aware. We need to be more attentive and aggressive to that topic at hand, because we know there's a lot of people that are affected by policing in this city, by police and state violence. A lot of people are affected by it. A lot of people are affected by homelessness and addiction, mental health crisis. So we need to keep up the energy. We need to keep pushing, for more, community-based programs, more health-based programs. We need to get these people the resources that they need. Keep highlighting police and state violence. We need to keep it up. I know there's a lot of burnout within the community. A lot of people aren't organizing anymore. Like Fight for Our Lives, thank you for your work. But they're one of the big voices, one of the big organizations pushing that are stay active, stay in the spotlight. So it's up to us to keep step up and be the leaders that the community needs us to be. And to be the figures that the community needs us to be, because if we don't fight for them, nobody will. And that's one thing I agreed with Eddie. Fight for the 505. We need to fight for Albuquerque for real. Sword and shield, absolutely. So aside from that, another thing I wanted to talk about and just give a little bit of time to was Travis Scott and the victims of Astroworld and its survivors. I watched a lot of the video and footage on TikTok with my wife. She had showed it to me, and it needs to be highlighted more that celebrities have a responsibility within the music culture, whatever genre of music it is. You have a responsibility, an obligation to keep every one of your concert goers safe, whether you be a headliner or an opener. They're there to see you. You have a responsibility to keep those people safe. And I watched those videos of people chanting, stop the show, Travis, like, we need your help. The video of the woman up there talking to the camera guy, and her being, shoot off pretty much. And then the stagehand telling her that, if you don't get down, I'm going to push you down. And then the other dude, telling other people like, hey, we're trying to save lives out here. And then Drake and, who was it? Kylie, it's like they have a responsibility. Those are people that could have done something and didn't. And as a result, at least 8 people lost their lives and hundreds more injured. And they described it as hell. And listening to their words, that's what I could imagine it to be. So keep your head up. And there are resources to help with trauma. So be on the lookout for those, and look to your community. So understand it's not the easiest thing. But my next topic is, because one of the people that I play Xbox Live with, he was telling me, or he was saying something about, Black Lives Matter and Colin Kaepernick and something like that. I was so heated in the moment that I forgot, his initial point. But then he wanted to say to me that, he mostly sees the ones who are hurting black people, majority of the time, are black people. And it's like just some of that, Black lives don't matter to black people banter, so I had to put him in check. And since then, he's actually been a lot closer to me because I consider him a friend. We ain't never really talked politics, but since then he's kind of opened up a little bit more to me, and I think he's a little bit more receptive. So I think, I changed one heart, and that's what I hope to do, change one heart at a time. But anyway, I'm here. I want to fix that whole narrative, right? Because there's a lot that goes on in these communities that people don't see because it's not streamlined on mainstream media all the time. You don't see it because it's not at the front of articles. You don't see it because not a lot of people are talking about these things. There's a grassroots organization called New Era Detroit. They teach political education. They do violence intervention programs for teenagers at high schools that are trying to get into fights, gang violence, stuff like that. And there's this other organization called Heal the Hood, and so I'm going to share with you some clips shared by Unicorn Riot. They're a media outlet, that talks about the revolutionary stuff on the ground that mainstream media organizations don't really talk about, and they cover like a lot of court cases that the media's not talking about, like not even Kyle Rittenhouse, which gotta say is a travesty right now. The prosecution ended their case, but whatever. So Unicorn Riot, and we're gonna talk about this whole narrative, right, and try to change that narrative. So this article was from August 23rd, 2015. It says Unify or Die, Revolutionary Struggle and American Gangs. The publicized deaths of young black men like Michael Brown, Eric Garner, and Freddie Gray at the hands of the police has inspired a new generation of black liberation fighters in this country. This new wave of revolutionary consciousness is once again challenging the forces of systemic racism and the global capitalist system that supports it. As a result, local and national grassroots organizations like Black Lives Matter, Black Liberation Project, and Heal the Hood have sprung up across the country. These movements have managed to attract a significant portion of America's youth from all racial, sexual, and religious backgrounds. However, a much less talked about trend is now happening on our streets. Organized street gangs like the Crips and Bloods are declaring truces and coming together to protect their communities. To many, this may seem to be an unbelievable contradiction, as many of these gang rivalries are generations old and still running. When one takes into consideration the revolutionary legacy that many street gangs come from, it becomes easier to understand. Similar truces between street gangs have come about during times of political revolt, such as the Watts riots of 1965 or the English riots in 2006. Understanding how and why these truces came about and why they've fallen apart is crucial towards maintaining a sustainable, reliable, and resilient self-defense against socioeconomic and racial oppression. Towards that end, we must first explore the history of America's street gangs. Since America's inception, its children have known violence to be their most effective method of communication. Much of that violence has been exported to faraway lands who find themselves unlucky enough to be a part of America's national interests. While billions of our taxpayers' dollars are spent supporting imperialist wars abroad, a much less publicized war is happening on our own streets. Like most wars, this conflict has ravaged and plundered the most disenfranchised, desperate, and vulnerable communities. Heading the front lines are the organized street gangs who battle each other and the police for money, power, and control. Yet hidden beneath the fog of war exists a hidden legacy of oppression and revolutionary struggle, a legacy which gangs share but are also tragically unaware of. It's easy to forget this legacy when most of its storytellers are imprisoned or dead, and even easier when we can label them as nothing more than organized groups of morally bankrupt thugs. However, upon closer inspection, one will see that both the past and present have shown that there is a two-sided character to gangs, a two-sided character that comprises of both revolutionary politics and criminality. Gangs of Chicago, street warfare, and the fight for survival. This dual character can especially be seen in Chicago's gang scene. Chicago's infamous gang history begins as early as the 1920s. Most gang activity revolved around illegal alcohol operations or bootlegging, which was controlled by Italian and Sicilian gangs. By the 1950s, waves of African Americans began moving closer into the city, which caused significant racial tension within Chicago's massively segregated borders. This tension frequently resulted in marauding white gangs beating up blacks in the streets for little to no reason other than being black. As a result, black gangs, or clubs, began springing up as a method of self-defense. This is not to suggest that all black gangs were on the same page. Early black gangs like the 14th Street Clovers and the Egyptian Cobras frequently fought each other over territory or for sport. Fighting was viewed in the gangs, as it is still today, as a badge of honor, a rite of passage, and or proof of one's masculinity. Not having this badge could mean the difference between being the oppressed or being the oppressor. Reasons to join the gang at that time varied by individual, but oftentimes revolved around the need for protection and to gain respect in the one's neighborhood. Gang membership in Chicago's predominantly black communities was surging in the 1950s, and gang warfare became a normalized occurrence. Gang fights happened so regularly that they would attract crowds of people from the neighborhood who came just to watch. The Civil Rights Era, gangs and community organization. The Civil Rights era of the 1960s would produce a radical change in Chicago's gangs. It was during this time that the biggest African American gangs in the city, the Vice Lords, Blackstone Rangers, and the Disciple Nation, Gangster Disciples, GDs, began getting involved in local political organizing. Most of this organizing activity was conducted between the late 1950s and early 1970s. It was particularly during the Civil Rights era of the 1960s that the three largest gangs in Chicago formed an alliance called Lord Stones and Disciples, LSD for short. They began organizing rallies and marches against construction sites, demanding that more black people from the local community be hired. These gangs would regularly hold meetings with Fred Hampton of the Illinois Black Panther Party to discuss how to further unite and organize the underprivileged communities of Chicago. Fred Hampton believed that only a multiracial alliance of committed revolutionaries could destroy systemic racism. Hampton, along with Jose Cha-Cha Jimenez of the Young Lords, were instrumental in brokering a multiracial ceasefire between Chicago's most powerful gangs. At a press conference in May 1969, Fred Hampton would coin a truce called the Rainbow Coalition, a phrase that Jesse Jackson would later appropriate for use in his failed presidential bid 20 years later. This coalition initially included not just gangs, but also the Black Panther Party, a white militant group known as the Young Patriots, and a Puerto Rican gang known as the Young Lords. I want to just say something about the Young Patriots real quick. There's been a lot of discord, uncertainty when it comes to the Young Patriots and their intentions. So they once were using the Confederate flag as a banner, I guess, and a lot of people will call them racist or Confederates themselves for using the Confederate flag. In an interview, I think it was on Revolutionary Left Rev Left's radio with a Brett. I think it was that podcast. But anyway, one of the members of Young Patriots said that they only use the Confederate flag as a banner in an attempt to speak to members of the white community who otherwise would not listen to their revolutionary organizational, ideology and mission. It was to attract people from racist white supremacist crowds, right? That's what they were doing it for. They aren't in and of themselves racist. Otherwise, they wouldn't be working with Fred Hampton, or the Young Lords. They wouldn't. Fred Hampton was a smart guy. To call the Young Patriots racist or insinuate that they are would be to call Fred Hampton dumb. And Fred Hampton was probably one of the most integral, intellectual revolutionaries of the 20th century. So, let's see, where was I at? The Rainbow Coalition later expanded to include various left-wing organizations like the American Indian Movement and the Brown Berets. I have worked with the Brown Berets on various occasions. on the ground here in Albuquerque, and I love them. They're the greatest. They really are. Reverse criminology, the Young Lord way. The Young Lords remains one of the only examples of a street gang that fully made the conversion from criminal gang to revolutionary organization. The Young Lords started off as a typical turf gang in the then predominantly Puerto Rican neighborhoods of Lincoln Park, Chicago. The shooting of unarmed 20-year-old Archelaus Cruz sparked what is known historically as the Division Street Riots of 1966. This particular rebellion against police violence left a deep impression on the residents of Lincoln Park, and a renewed political consciousness began to infect the neighborhood. A myriad of different political groups began mobilizing resources for the defense of Latino neighborhoods and their right to determination. Under the leadership of Jose Chacha Jimenez, the Young Lords would join the cause and organize direct action to challenge gentrification and police brutality. They would also begin to take part in international politics and became determined advocates for the Puerto Rican independence movement. Like the Black Panthers, the Young Lords organized community welfare projects and provided free breakfast programs, clothing drives for the underprivileged, and free daycare for children. They would also build numerous social centers, healthcare clinics, in order to sustain and grow these social programs. Their high-profile actions would eventually attract national attention, and from Lincoln Park, they would begin to expand to other cities such as Milwaukee, New York City, Philadelphia, etc. Jose Chacha Jimenez and the Chicago branch would later co-found the multiracial, anti-racist, and anti-capitalist Rainbow Coalition, which included various Caucasian, African American, Latino, and Native American social organizations. Operation COINTELPRO, the state strikes back. These developments, of course, did not go unnoticed by the state. The unprecedented show of cross-cultural unity presented a clear and significant threat to systemic racism, so much so that the FBI launched a covert operation to destroy it. The operation, codenamed COINTELPRO, was led by then FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, who would order his agents to disrupt, misdirect, discredit, neutralize, or otherwise eliminate the activities of these movements and their leaders. The Black Panthers, Young Lords, and the Rainbow Coalition were all prime targets for this operation. The FBI first took advantage of personality conflicts and division within these groups so as to create distrust and confusion. These tactics played a major role in driving a wedge between the Young Lords in Chicago and New York. Additionally, splits were cultivated between black street gangs and the Black Panther Party. It was well known that the Black Panthers recruited from the same pool of young people that the gangs did, which sometimes led to conflicts between the two. The FBI would take advantage of this fact by sending letters to Blackstone Ranger leader Jeff Fort alleging that Fred Hampton was planning to assassinate him. Ultimately, it would be the FBI that coordinated the Chicago Police Department's assassination of Fred Hampton in his sleep. He would not be the only revolutionary to die at the hands of COINTELPRO, as scores of political leaders across the nation were rounded up, murdered, imprisoned, and forced on the run. Gangs make a comeback. During the revolutionary period of the 1960s, street gang activity was dwindling at a rapid pace. This was primarily because the youth pool gangs were recruiting from were joining revolutionary organizations instead. One famous example is a man by the name of Alprentice Bunchy Carter, a known Slozon Avenue gang member turned revolutionary who founded the Southern California branch of the Black Panther Party. Carter was one of many former gangsters in California that joined the Black Power movement. In some cities, crime dwindled so much that criminal gangs like the Slozon Renegades on the West Coast began to disappear altogether. After COINTELPRO, however, gangs began to make a steady comeback. It was shortly after this that two of the most notorious gangs in American history were born, the Bloods and the Crips. Bastards of the Party, the birth of the Crips and Bloods. Today's Crips and Bloods have become world-renowned for their large numbers, drug trafficking, and heinous acts of brutality. What many do not know is that both gangs are the direct result of an incomplete revolution. The Crips started out in the early 1970s as an alliance of various gangs in Los Angeles. Founded in 1971 by Raymond Washington and Stanley Tookie Williams, the Crips at that time known as the Cribs to acknowledge their youthful energy, grew up idolizing black revolutionaries like Malcolm X and Huey P. Newton and attempted to emulate the Black Panther Party. Some ex-gangsters would even make the claim that Crip originally stood for common revolution in progress. Founders Tookie Williams and Raymond Washington say that they formed the gang to protect their neighborhoods both from other gangs as well as the racist corruption and brutality of the police. Whether there was a specific revolutionary program remains unclear. It is clear that the youthful Crips wanted to emulate the Black Panthers' appearance by sporting black leather jackets. These jackets were typically obtained via robbery or strong arming other youths for theirs. It was this practice of robbing unaffiliated youths of their jackets that allegedly played a crucial role in their inner split and the rise of their now notorious rivals, the Bloods. As Crip influence expanded all over Los Angeles, so too did their opposition. The Crips gained territory by attacking and/or convincing smaller clubs to join. One of these clubs was the Piru Street family. Crip co-founder Raymond Washington recruited the Piru Street family in 1971, and the gang subsequently changed their name to the Piru Street Crips. According to Tookie Williams, past rivalries between the Compton Crip and the Piru sets sparked up because the Compton Crips were upset that Raymond Washington brought the Pirus into their alliance. This intergang rivalry had existed even before the Crips alliance came into existence, and it wasn't long before tensions completely boiled over. Some sources within the Piru gang claimed that the last straw was over the Compton Crips' notorious practice of robbing unaffiliated or neutral youths for their jackets. Whatever the cause, it wasn't long before the two started clashing, and only months later, the Pirus would split off from the Crips. They then called a mass meeting of all major non-Crip gangs in the city to discuss the growing problem of Crip dominance and intimidation. These non-Crip related gangs would go on to form what is now known as the Bloods. So this whole article is pretty lengthy, so I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I will drop a link in the description of this video. So here, look, I'll read this part. Let me see. I think this is towards the end of the article. Lessons from the past guide the future. Perhaps the biggest impact of the Watts Truce was the role it had in destroying the perception that opposing gangs could never work together towards a common goal. To this day, the treaty continues to serve as a powerful inspiration to the current generation of revolutionary-minded gangsters and allies alike. It should come as no surprise that history has repeated itself in the streets of Ferguson and Baltimore. Once again, the constant racist brutality by the state against poor communities of color has backfired. Thousands have showed their power on the streets and fought back together as one. What the media and many of the so-called social justice leaders won't acknowledge is that gang members comprise a significant portion of those rebellious youth. As was the case in the late 1960s and early 1970s, the same youths who joined gangs are some of the first ones to join revolutionary movements and put themselves on the front lines against racist oppression. However, when the rebellion dies down or is crushed, it is those very same youths who usually wind up reverting back to the gangster lifestyle. Therefore, it is absolutely critical that revolutionaries work to continue to develop massive revolutionary consciousness and conduct direct actions which not only focuses on the underprivileged communities we live in, but also pays special attention to the youth. Secondly, revolutionaries must help to forge peace and understanding between warring gangs, not just in times of rebellion, but most especially in times of non-rebellion or during business as usual. Heal the hood, unite the people, fight back. This is what I was talking about at the beginning of this reading. Now that flames from Baltimore and Ferguson have settled, we must begin the process of healing the massive wounds from the effects of chronic poverty, poor education, and state repression that lays waste to our youth. At the same time, we must be able to protect the gains we make with mass self-defense. Such a defense must in some way incorporate the youth gangs that act as the unofficial militias of the hood. The Black Panther Party, Brown Berets, and Young Lords developed programs that attempted to do just that. Since then, a variety of organizations have picked up where they left off. Heal the Hood Milwaukee is one such group. Started off and led by local community members in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Heal the Hood Milwaukee seeks to end the generations-old war between the Chicago-based folks and People's Gang alliances. They are organizing locally within their neighborhoods, both for unified social healing and organized community defense. Their efforts have not been in vain. Every year, Heal the Hood MKE manages to draw hundreds of people to their annual block party on Milwaukee's north side. This year, a mass of people gathered to watch vice lords and gangsters' disciples shake hands and declare an end to gang warfare between their local sets. Though the gesture was largely symbolic, it must be understood how significant a gesture it was in a city that is rated as one of the top 10 most dangerous cities in America. As one would expect, the local police are attempting to do whatever possible to disrupt, misdirect, and discredit anyone who seeks to forge peace and understanding between Milwaukee's warring neighborhoods. In days leading up to the event, police harassed local organizers by pulling them over and throwing them into holding cells for petty charges. On the other hand, local media attention was forced to acknowledge that the block party was happening, but outright refused to mention the gang's ceasefire at the same event. The community must respond by making it our duty as parents, teachers, students, brothers and sisters alike to unify, organize, and educate our people. History has proven that there is no other way to freedom. So, following this, I will share some video recording of the leader of the GDs and the what was it? Oh, the Vice Lords, right? I'll share some commentary video of both. So I'm also trying to fight back against this this whole narrative that people use, or this whole ideology that white people like to go by, that racism no longer really exists. It's not about racism, it's about class. And I do that by highlighting one of the current court cases that's happening right now surrounding the Unite the Right organizers and the Ahmaud Arbery, the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, the trial that's going on against those 3 people. So let me pull this up right quick. In one of the clips that I'm going to share, it shows one cop who responded to the murder of Ahmaud Arbery and some things that were said during that entire investigation and how concerning that is. So here's that clip.
So taking you to page 33, I'm going to go ahead on page 33 and have you start about midway where you're talking about being on Zellwood. So you're talking to Mr. Greg McMichael about, we're coming up on Zellwood.
Yes, ma'am.
What does he say?
He confirms that, yes, Zellwood.
Okay. And then where did he say they went?
They went down Holmes Road.
All right. And did he indicate why they went down Holmes Road?
He mentions that he turned down, Mr. Arbery turned down Holmes Road.
Okay. And at some point, does he indicate whether Mr. Arbery sees them?
Yes, ma'am.
And once he sees them, what does Mr. Arbery do?
He turned and started running back. He uses the words "that way."
All right. And then does he tell you where that is, back toward where?
He indicates the intersection of back towards this intersection.
Does he actually say what intersection at that point?
No, ma'am, he doesn't right at this point.
He just says intersection.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, page 33. All right, so I'm actually going to have you give the jury the specific quotes on line 20 through 22 that Greg McMichael says. Okay? And what I want is, does he first indicate the guy? Let me think. The guy is, he sees Mr. McMichael. And then does he say at some point, he, meaning the guy, turns and starts running back that way?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So going to page 34 now. Did you ask Mr. McMichael where Mr. McMichael tried to pin Mr. Arbery the first time?
Yes, ma'am.
Where did he indicate he tried to pin Mr. Arbery the first time?
On Burford Road.
All right. Now, going to page 35. As they're on Holmes Road, where is Mr. Greg McMichael? Line 21.
He says that he is in the back of the truck with the 357.
All right. Now, specifically, on Holmes Road in the back of the truck with a 357. He then says specifically, I want you to quote this, line 25 into the top of line 1 and 2 on page 36. What does he specifically say?
Quoting, he says, "I said stop, you know, I'll blow your fucking head off or something. I was trying to convey to this guy we were not playing, you know."
Okay. Now, does he specifically indicate at what point he says this to Mr. Arbery?
No, ma'am.
All right, so you don't know where on Holmes Road it is that he says this to Mr. Arbery?
No, ma'am.
Next is some screenshots that I got off of Unicorn Riot's website, and it's just some things that said from some of the organizers of Unite the Right. One of them, notably Richard Spencer. If you don't know who Richard Spencer is, he's one of the dudes who Trump supporters. He coined the term the alt-right, and he also got punched in the face during an interview. Here are those clips of his Trump, support, and him getting punched in the face.
Hail Trump! Hail our people! Hail victory!
Our lived experience is being a young white person in 21st century America, seeing your identity be demeaned. I've lived in this multicultural mess my entire life, and I'm trying to get out of it.
Those people don't like me.
Are you
to be
like
honest.
the hipster version of the neo-Nazi movement?
It's Pepe's become kind of a symbol.
Now, here are those screenshots that I just talked about seconds ago, highlighting that racism still very much exists, and that, the people who are doing harm against, black people aren't just black people, and there are things being done within the black communities all over the country that aren't talked about, but that are trying to solve black on black violence, trying to solve gang violence, and trying to, just trying to change that, just trying to heal our communities. And that white hate and white violence against black people and other marginalized communities is very real, and it still exists today. And it cannot go ignored, and it has to be acknowledged in every single form, in every system that exists today. So, in closing, as I end this video, right at the end of this, you will see those interviews of the Vice Lords and the Gangster's Disciples. And on that note, I will catch you guys next time. If you would like to support my work, here is my PayPal and my Cash App link. And I love you guys. Be safe, and uhuru.